at the moment that Diana, Princess of Wales, has in fact been killed in that car accident in Paris just a few hours ago. There had been extreme concern that Diana was very seriously injured when she was taken from the wreckage. There was a...
What Elton John revealed about Princess Diana will shock you. The phone call that changed everything. The explosive fight that nearly ended their friendship forever. The secret Diana kept that could have destroyed the royal family. For 25 years, Elton stayed silent about what really happened behind palace doors. The midnight conversations, the tears, the betrayal that left him heartbroken.
Yeah, it's like I said, I thought Hitler was right or something. It was like the furor it caused. And it's not as if it's like, oh my God, does she really? It's like an open secret, as I said. And I have the greatest respect for her as an artist, especially as a recording artist. And she's been a friend who's come to dinner, but it was probably something I should have bitten my lip on. But as I get older, I'm increasingly prone to not.
But now he's finally speaking out about the woman who saved his life and the devastating truth about her final weeks. To understand this extraordinary friendship, we need to go back to the beginning, long before he became the Rocket Man, long before the sequined jackets and diamond-studded glasses. There was a boy named Reginald Kenneth Dwight, born on March 25, 1947, in the London suburb of Pinner, Middlesex. Reggie came into the world during a time when Britain was still recovering from the war. His parents, Stanley and Sheila Dwight, had married just 2 years earlier, and like many young couples of their generation, they were trying to build a life in uncertain times. The Dwight household was far from typical. Stanley worked as a trumpet player with the Bob Miller Band, a semi-professional group that performed at military dances and social events. This meant music was already flowing through the family's daily life, though Stanley's job also meant he was frequently absent from home. According to multiple biographical sources, Stanley served in the Royal Air Force, which kept him away for extended periods. This absence would shape young Reggie's childhood in ways that would later influence his music and his need for deep, lasting connections. Sheila, Reggie's mother, was a different character entirely. Where Stanley was distant and often critical, Sheila possessed what biographers describe as a free spirit. She was more outgoing than her husband and seemed to understand her son's artistic nature better than anyone else in the family. The contrast between his parents was stark, and it created a household where tension often filled the air. When Stanley was home, according to various accounts, arguments between the parents were frequent and intense, causing young Reggie considerable distress. The future superstar showed signs of his exceptional musical talent almost from the moment he could reach a piano. By the age of 3, he was already picking out melodies on his grandmother's piano, an instrument that sat in their modest home. Within a year, his natural ability had become impossible to ignore. His mother later recalled hearing him play The Skater's Waltz by ear, note for note, after hearing it just once. This wasn't simply a child showing interest in music. This was genuine musical genius revealing itself. At age 7, formal piano lessons began, and his teachers quickly recognized they were dealing with someone special. His instructors at the time noted that he could play back complex pieces after hearing them only once, like what one teacher described as a gramophone record. This ability to absorb and reproduce music with such precision would later become one of his defining characteristics as a performer and composer. When Reggie turned 11, his exceptional talent earned him a junior scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music in London. This was a significant achievement for any child, but particularly meaningful for a family of modest means. The scholarship represented not just recognition of his abilities, but also a pathway to a future that might have seemed impossible otherwise. However, even at this prestigious institution, Reggie showed signs of the rebellious spirit that would later define Elton John. Rather than focusing entirely on classical training, he was drawn to the popular music of the day. He would often skip his formal lessons to explore London on the underground, absorbing the sounds and energy of the city. His teachers found him frustrating because while he could easily pass his exams due to his natural ability, he showed little interest in the discipline and structure they were trying to instill. He preferred playing like Jerry Lee Lewis at school functions, rather than mastering Bach or Handel, much to his instructor's dismay. The family dynamics that had always been strained finally reached a breaking point when Reggie was 14 years old. His parents' marriage, which had been troubled from the start, officially ended in divorce. This event had a profound impact on the teenager, who had already been struggling with the tension in his household. The divorce meant that the one stable musical influence in his life, his father, was now completely absent, while also representing the final collapse of any pretense of family harmony. In what would prove to be one of the most positive changes in his young life, his mother remarried a man named Fred Fairbrother. Fred was a local painter who brought a warmth and supportiveness to the family that had been missing. Reggie was so fond of his stepfather that he affectionately called him Durf, which was simply Fred, spelled backwards. This playful nickname suggests the kind of relationship they developed, one built on humor and genuine affection, rather than the criticism and distance he had experienced with his biological father. The family moved to a small flat in North London, and it was in this modest apartment that some of the most important songs of the early 1970s would eventually be written. According to music historians, Reggie lived in this flat until he had achieved something that seemed impossible just years earlier: 4 albums simultaneously in the American Top 40 chart. By age 15, with the encouragement of his mother and stepfather, Reggie had landed his first professional gig as a pianist at the Northwood Hills Hotel, a local pub. He worked Thursday through Sunday nights, playing a mixture of popular covers and his own compositions for audiences who had no idea they were watching a future global superstar. The patrons simply knew him as Reggie, a talented young man who could make the piano sing. It was during this period that he joined his first real band, a group called Bluesology. The band played the London club circuit and eventually became the backing group for established acts. This was Reggie's first taste of the professional music world, and it opened his eyes to possibilities beyond the suburbs of London. Through Bluesology, he began working with established American soul and R&B artists who were touring in England, including the Isley Brothers and Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. But perhaps more importantly, it was through Bluesology that he would meet 2 men who would inadvertently give him his stage name: Elton Dean, the band's saxophone player, and Long John Baldry, a blues singer they worked with, had no idea that their names would be combined to create one of the most recognizable names in music history. When Reginald Kenneth Dwight decided he needed a name that would work better in the music business, he chose Elton John as a tribute to these 2 musicians who had been part of his early professional development. The transformation from Reggie Dwight to Elton John wasn't just about choosing a catchier name. It represented a fundamental shift in how he saw himself and his possibilities. The shy, sometimes awkward teenager from Pinner was evolving into someone who could command attention and express himself with increasing confidence. However, there was still one crucial element missing from his musical development: the ability to write lyrics that matched his musical abilities. This missing piece would soon be filled in a way that no one could have predicted. In 1967, now calling himself Elton John, he responded to an advertisement in New Musical Express, a popular British music publication. Liberty Records was looking for new songwriters, and both Elton and a 17-year-old from Lincolnshire named Bernie Taupin answered the same ad. Neither of them passed the audition in the traditional sense, but when Elton mentioned that he could write music but struggled with lyrics, he was handed a sealed envelope from a pile of submissions. Inside were poems written by Bernie Taupin. The meeting between these 2 young men would prove to be one of the most significant partnerships in music history. Bernie, a farmer's son with a gift for words, had been writing poetry since childhood, but had no musical ability whatsoever. Elton, meanwhile, could create melodies that would stick in people's heads for decades, but couldn't craft the kind of narrative lyrics that would give those melodies deeper meaning. The combination was perfect, though neither of them realized it at the time. Their working method, established almost immediately and maintained for over 50 years, was remarkably simple yet effective. Bernie would write lyrics, often drawing from his own experiences or observations about life, love, and loss. He would then send these lyrics to Elton, who would sit at his piano and create melodies that seemed to emerge almost automatically from the words. They rarely worked in the same room together, which allowed each of them to focus on their individual strengths without interference. Their first collaboration was a song called Scarecrow, recorded in 1967. While it wasn't a commercial success, it established the pattern that would eventually produce some of the most beloved songs in popular music. Bernie's introspective, often poetic lyrics, combined with Elton's gift for memorable melodies, created something that was both commercially appealing and artistically satisfying. By 1968, the team had been hired as staff songwriters for DJM Records, where they spent the next 2 years writing songs for other artists. This period was crucial for their development as songwriters. They learned how to craft songs that would work for different types of performers, while also developing their own distinctive style. They wrote for established artists like Lulu and Roger Cook, gaining valuable experience in the commercial music business. But Elton's ambitions went beyond writing for other people. He wanted to perform his own songs, to be the voice that brought Bernie's words to life. In 1969, they released their first album together, Empty Sky. While it received positive reviews from music critics, it didn't achieve commercial success. The British public wasn't quite ready for what they were offering, and the album barely registered on the charts. However, music industry insiders were beginning to take notice. The combination of Bernie's thoughtful, often melancholic lyrics with Elton's soaring melodies and distinctive vocal style was something new in popular music. They were bridging the gap between the introspective singer-songwriter movement that was emerging in the late 1960s and the more theatrical, performance-oriented rock that would dominate the 1970s. Their breakthrough came with their second album, simply titled Elton John, released in 1970. The album featured a song that would become one of their most enduring classics, Your Song. This track perfectly encapsulated what made their partnership special. Bernie's lyrics were simple but heartfelt, expressing the kind of genuine emotion that resonated with listeners across different backgrounds and ages. Elton's melody was both accessible and sophisticated, with a piano arrangement that showcased his classical training while remaining firmly rooted in popular music. The success of Your Song marked the beginning of what would become one of the most successful recording careers in music history. But more than that, it established Elton John as an artist who could combine technical musical excellence with genuine emotional expression. The shy boy from Pinner had found his voice, and the world was ready to listen. This early success also marked the beginning of Elton's evolution into the flamboyant performer the world would come to know. The costumes, the glasses, the theatrical stage presence were all still in the future, but the foundation was being laid. He was discovering that he could be someone different on stage than he was in his daily life. Someone more confident, more expressive, more willing to take risks. As 1970 drew to a close, Elton John was no longer just a hopeful songwriter from London's suburbs. He was becoming a genuine star, with his music finding audiences not just in Britain, but around the world. The partnership with Bernie Taupin was producing songs that would define a generation, and the stage was set for even greater success in the years to come. The first major relationship crisis in Elton's life came in 1970, just as his career was beginning to take off. He had been engaged to Linda Woodrow, then known as Linda Hannon, a woman he had met at a club in Sheffield in 1968. According to multiple biographical accounts, Linda was working as a secretary and had become an integral part of Elton's life during his struggling years. She was not just his girlfriend, but also his financial supporter, paying for their shared flat in London, and even buying her own engagement ring, because neither Elton nor Bernie Taupin had enough money at the time. Their relationship seemed serious enough that wedding preparations were underway. Linda later recalled that the registry office had been booked and Elton's mother had even ordered the wedding cake. But just weeks before the planned ceremony, everything fell apart in the most dramatic way possible. After a night out drinking with Bernie Taupin and blues singer Long John Baldry at the Bag O' Nails Club in Soho, Elton came home at 4 o'clock in the morning and woke Linda up to tell her the engagement was off. The advice that changed the course of Elton's life came from Long John Baldry, who reportedly told him during that night of drinking, "Oh, my dear, for God's sake, you're getting married and you love Bernie more than you love this girl. This is ridiculous. Put a stop to it now." According to various accounts, Both Baldry and Taupin had realized something that Elton himself was struggling to acknowledge. He was not ready for heterosexual marriage, and perhaps never would be. The end of this engagement would later become the inspiration for one of Elton's most emotionally powerful songs. In 1975, he released "Someone Saved My Life Tonight," with lyrics written by Bernie Taupin that directly referenced this period of his life. The song included the painful lines, "You nearly had me roped and tied, altar-bound hypnotized," which Linda found hurtful even decades later. The someone who saved his life was Long John Baldry, affectionately referred to as Sugar Bear in the song. Linda has since spoken about how devastating the breakup was for her. She was left in their shared apartment while Elton's stepfather arrived with a truck to move his belongings out. She never received any financial compensation from Elton, contrary to some media reports, and the two lost all contact after the split. Remarkably, in 2020, when Linda needed knee surgery and couldn't afford to take time off work during the COVID-19 pandemic, Elton learned of her situation through media reports and offered to help pay for her medical expenses, showing that despite the pain of their past, he still cared about her well-being. The canceled wedding marked a turning point in Elton's understanding of his own sexuality, though it would take years for him to fully come to terms with who he was. Throughout the early 1970s, as his fame grew exponentially, he began to explore relationships with men, though he did so very quietly given the social climate of the time. His first significant same-sex relationship was with John Reed, who became both his romantic partner and his manager. They met in 1970 and spent 5 years together in what was primarily an emotional rather than physical relationship. Reed continued to manage Elton's career until 1998, long after their romantic relationship had ended, demonstrating that they had found a way to maintain a professional partnership despite the personal complications. The relationship with Reed coincided with Elton's emergence as a global superstar. The early 1970s saw him dominating the charts with songs like Your Song, Rocket Man, and Crocodile Rock. But success brought its own pressures and challenges. Elton began struggling with substances, turning to alcohol and drugs to cope with the demands of fame, the stress of constant touring, and his ongoing questions about his identity and place in the world. In 1976, Elton made a bold decision that shocked many people. He came out as bisexual in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine. This was an enormously brave move for a major pop star in the 1970s, when homosexuality was still largely taboo in mainstream entertainment. However, people close to him knew that this was only a partial truth. His friends and family understood that he was gay, not bisexual, but he wasn't yet ready to be completely open about his sexuality. The internal conflict about his identity reached another dramatic peak in 1984, when Elton made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him. At the age of 36, he married Renate Blauel, a 30-year-old German sound engineer whom he had met while recording music with Kiki D. The wedding took place in Australia and was a lavish affair, but it was also deeply confusing to those who attended. Renate was a talented professional in her own right. She had worked as a flight attendant for Lufthansa before becoming a successful sound engineer, and she had worked on several of Elton's albums. She was the daughter of a wealthy German publisher and had made her own way in the world. But the marriage seemed to baffle everyone who knew Elton well. Rod Stewart's congratulatory telegram to the newlyweds captured the mood perfectly. "You may still be standing, but we're all on the floor." Even more telling, John Reed, Elton's ex-boyfriend and current manager, served as best man at the wedding. During the honeymoon, Elton's current boyfriend at the time watched the proceedings from the hotel window. The entire situation was surreal and painful for everyone involved. According to Renate's later accounts, Elton told her during their honeymoon that he wanted to end the marriage. She reportedly told him that she had contemplated suicide upon hearing this news. The marriage lasted 4 years, from 1984 to 1988, but it was clear to everyone involved that it was not working. Elton later admitted, "She was the classiest woman I've ever met, but it wasn't meant to be. I was living a lie." The marriage to Renate represented Elton's attempt to conform to social expectations and create what he thought was a normal life. But it was ultimately an experiment that caused pain to both of them. During this period, Elton struggled with various personal demons, including eating disorders, substance abuse, and depression. The pressure of maintaining a public image that didn't match his private reality was taking a serious toll on his mental health. In 1992, Elton finally came to terms with who he really was. In an interview with Rolling Stone, he stated clearly, "I'm quite comfortable about being gay." This admission marked the beginning of a new chapter in his personal life, one where he could finally be authentic about his identity and relationships. The following year, in 1993, Elton met David Furnish, a Canadian filmmaker who was working in advertising. Their meeting took place at a dinner party, and the connection between them was immediate and genuine. David was intelligent, grounded, and had his own successful career, which meant he wasn't interested in Elton for his fame or money. This was exactly the kind of relationship Elton had been searching for his entire adult life. David Furnish represented stability and genuine companionship in a way that none of Elton's previous relationships had achieved. He was supportive of Elton's career, but maintained his own identity and professional goals. Most importantly, he helped Elton address some of the destructive patterns that had characterized his earlier relationships and lifestyle choices. Their relationship deepened over the years, and they became true life partners in every sense of the word. On December 21, 2005, the very day that civil partnerships became legal in the United Kingdom, Elton and David formalized their union. Nearly a decade later, when same-sex marriage became legal in England in 2014, they converted their civil partnership into a full marriage, celebrating on the anniversary of their original partnership ceremony. By this time, they had also become parents through surrogacy, welcoming 2 sons, Zachary in 2010 and Elijah in 2013. Becoming a father later in life gave Elton a new sense of purpose and responsibility. He has often said that his children are the most important thing in his life, more meaningful than any career achievement or accolade. While Elton was navigating his complex journey through relationships and self-discovery across the Atlantic, another future icon was experiencing her own childhood challenges. Diana Frances Spencer was born on July 1, 1961, at Park House, a property on the Queen's Sandringham estate. Her arrival into the world was significant, not just because of her family's connections to British nobility, but because of the circumstances surrounding her birth. Diana's parents, John Spencer, Viscount Althorpe, and Frances Roche, had been hoping for a son to carry on the Spencer family name. They had already lost one infant son, John, who died shortly after birth just a year before Diana arrived. The pressure to produce a male heir was immense, and this desire for a boy rather than another girl created underlying tension in the family from the very beginning. The Spencer family was already well connected to the royal family. Diana's father had served as an equerry to King George VI from 1950 to 1952, and then to Queen Elizabeth II from 1952 to 1954. When Diana's parents married in 1954, Queen Elizabeth herself had attended their wedding at Westminster Abbey. The families moved in the same social circles, and Park House, where Diana grew up, was actually rented from the Queen. Diana's childhood, at least in its early years, seemed idyllic from the outside. The Spencers lived in a grand house on a beautiful estate, and Diana's playmates included Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, who would often come over to swim in the Spencer family pool. She grew up calling Queen Elizabeth II Aunt Lilibet, a reflection of how intertwined the two families were. But beneath the surface of privilege and connection to royalty, the Spencer family was struggling with serious problems. The marriage between John and Frances was troubled from the start, and the pressure to produce a male heir had taken a toll on their relationship. Frances had been subjected to what her son Charles later described as humiliating medical examinations to determine why she hadn't given birth to a son earlier. The family dynamics became increasingly strained as Diana grew older. Her father was often distant and critical, while her mother struggled with her own unhappiness in the marriage. The atmosphere in the house was tense, and even as a small child, Diana could sense that something was fundamentally wrong. When Diana was just 7 years old, her world was turned upside down. Her parents divorced in a bitter and public battle that left lasting scars on all of the Spencer children. The custody battle was particularly traumatic, with John ultimately winning custody of Diana and her siblings. This meant that Diana's mother, Frances, would no longer be a constant presence in her daily life. Diana's brother Charles later recalled the devastating impact of their mother's departure. While she was packing her stuff to leave, she promised Diana she'd come back to see her. Diana used to wait on the doorstep for her, but she never came. The sound of their mother's car driving away on the gravel driveway would haunt Diana for the rest of her life, creating deep-seated fears of abandonment that would influence all of her future relationships. Frances did eventually remarry, wedding Peter Shand Kidd in 1969, but her relationship with her children remained distant and complicated. Meanwhile, John Spencer also remarried in 1976, taking as his second wife Rain Legge, Countess of Dartmouth. Diana's relationship with her stepmother was particularly difficult. She found Rain controlling and intrusive, and their conflicts were sometimes so intense that Diana once pushed her stepmother down the stairs in anger. Diana later described her childhood as very unhappy and very unstable. The combination of her parents' bitter divorce, her mother's absence, her difficult relationship with her stepmother, and the general emotional dysfunction in the household created a foundation of insecurity that would affect Diana for the rest of her life. Education provided some stability in Diana's chaotic emotional world, though she was never particularly academic. She attended Riddlesworth Hall, a preparatory boarding school in Norfolk, from age 9 to 12, and then moved on to Westheath School near Sevenoaks, Kent. She showed talent in music, particularly as a pianist, and had a natural ability with children, but her academic performance was unremarkable. Despite the challenges of her upbringing, or perhaps because of them, Diana developed a deep empathy for others who were suffering. Even as a young person, she showed an unusual ability to connect with people who were in pain or need. This quality would later become one of her most celebrated characteristics as Princess of Wales, but it was rooted in her own experiences of emotional trauma and abandonment. The contrast between Diana's public image as a privileged aristocrat and the reality of her troubled childhood would later resonate with Elton John, who had his own experiences of family dysfunction and emotional complexity. Both of them had learned to present a polished exterior to the world, while dealing with significant personal struggles beneath the surface. By the time Diana reached her late teens, she had developed coping mechanisms that would serve her both well and poorly in her future role as a member of the royal family. She was naturally charming and had learned to read people's emotions and respond to their needs. But she also carried deep insecurities about her own worth and a persistent fear that the people she loved would eventually abandon her. Diana, with the compassion that would later become her trademark, approached Charles to offer her condolences about Lord Mountbatten's death. According to her own later accounts, she told him, "You looked so sad when you walked up the aisle at Mountbatten's funeral. It was the most tragic thing I've ever seen. My heart bled for you when I watched. I thought, it's wrong, you're lonely, you should be with somebody to look after you." Her words apparently had a profound effect on Charles, who was touched by her empathy and genuine concern. This compassionate moment sparked Charles's romantic interest in Diana. What followed was a brief but intense courtship that took place largely over the telephone. According to Diana's own recollections, they only met in person 13 times before becoming engaged. Most of their relationship developed through phone calls, with Charles calling her regularly to chat about their days and get to know each other better. Despite the limited time they had spent together, Charles began to consider Diana seriously as a potential bride. She seemed to meet all the criteria that the royal family required for the future queen. She was young, from a noble family with impeccable connections to the monarchy, and importantly, she had no previous romantic relationships that might complicate her position. The royal family's outdated but firm insistence that the future queen be a virgin made Diana's inexperience with men an asset rather than a liability. Charles invited Diana to join him for a weekend sailing aboard the royal yacht Britannia, and then to visit Balmoral Castle in Scotland to meet his family. Diana made an excellent impression on everyone, including Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, and the Queen Mother. Her natural warmth and charm won them over, and they gave their approval for Charles to pursue the relationship seriously. By early 1981, Charles had made his decision. On February 6th, he proposed to Diana at Windsor Castle, offering her a choice of engagement rings from a selection provided by the royal jewelers. Diana chose a stunning sapphire and diamond ring that became instantly famous, though it was notable that she selected it from a catalog rather than having one specially designed, meaning that technically anyone with enough money could have bought the same ring. The engagement was announced on February 24, 1981, and the public's reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Diana seemed like the perfect fairy tale princess. Young, beautiful, shy, and seemingly innocent. The press dubbed her Shy Di because of her apparent nervousness around cameras and crowds. During their engagement interview, when asked if they were in love, Diana quickly answered, "Of course." But Charles's response was more cautious and would prove prophetic. Whatever in love means. Even during the engagement period, there were signs that the relationship might not be as perfect as it appeared. Diana discovered that Charles had given Camilla Parker Bowles a bracelet engraved with G and F, apparently referring to their private nicknames, Gladys and Fred. This evidence of Charles's continuing emotional connection to Camilla deeply upset Diana, and she reportedly considered calling off the wedding. However, her sisters convinced her that it was too late to back out, and the preparations continued. The wedding took place on July 29, 1981, at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. It was a spectacle unlike anything the world had seen before. An estimated 750 million people worldwide watched the ceremony on television, making it one of the most viewed events in history. 600,000 people lined the streets of London to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. Diana's wedding dress, designed by David and Elizabeth Emanuel, featured a 25-foot train and 10,000 mother-of-pearl sequins. The entire event cost an estimated £57 million. Diana was just 20 years old when she became Princess of Wales, making her the first English woman to marry an heir to the throne in over 300 years. She was also the first royal bride to have held a paying job before her marriage. The fairy tale appearance of the wedding concealed the fact that Diana was already struggling with the enormous pressures of royal life and her growing doubts about her marriage. After their honeymoon, which lasted 3 months and included a cruise on the royal yacht Britannia, Charles and Diana settled into married life with residences at Kensington Palace in London and Highgrove House in the countryside. On November 5, 1981, just months after the wedding, the royal family announced that Diana was pregnant with her first child. However, the pregnancy was not the happy time it appeared to be from the outside. Diana was struggling with severe morning sickness, and the pressure of royal life was taking a serious toll on her mental health. At just 12 weeks pregnant, she fell down a staircase at Sandringham. While the fall was initially reported as an accident, Diana later revealed that she had deliberately thrown herself down the stairs because she was feeling so inadequate and desperate for attention from Charles. This incident was an early indication of the serious mental health challenges Diana was facing. She was struggling with what would now be recognized as postpartum depression, bulimia, and other eating disorders. The royal family's traditional response to such problems was to maintain a stiff upper lip and deal with difficulties privately. But Diana needed professional help that she was not receiving. On June 21, 1982, Diana gave birth to Prince William, who was second in line to the throne. Despite her personal struggles, Diana was determined to be a hands-on mother in a way that broke with royal tradition. She insisted on taking baby William with her on her first major royal tour to Australia and New Zealand, a decision that was initially controversial, but ultimately proved popular with the public. the sight of the young princess caring for her infant son endeared her to people around the world. 2 years later, on September 15, 1984, Diana gave birth to her second son, Prince Harry. According to various accounts, she knew she was carrying a boy, but chose not to tell Charles, who had been hoping for a daughter. When Harry was born, Charles allegedly exclaimed, "Oh God, it's a boy, and he's even got red hair." Diana later described this reaction as the beginning of the end of their marriage. By 1986, just 5 years into their marriage, the fundamental incompatibility between Charles and Diana had become impossible to ignore. Their age difference, different interests, and completely different approaches to royal duty created constant tension. Charles preferred quiet country life, classical music, and intellectual pursuits, while Diana enjoyed popular culture, dancing, and the excitement of London's social life. More significantly, both Charles and Diana began seeking emotional and physical fulfillment outside their marriage. Charles rekindled his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, whom he had dated before his marriage to Diana. Their affair resumed in 1986 and became an open secret among their social circle, though it remained hidden from the public for several more years. Diana, meanwhile, began her own affair with James Hewitt, a cavalry officer who had been hired to give her riding lessons. Hewitt was described as charming, handsome, and uncomplicated, quite different from the cerebral and emotionally distant Charles. Their relationship began in 1986 and lasted for 5 years, during which time Hewitt became a regular, if secret, visitor to Kensington Palace. The affair with Hewitt gave Diana some of the emotional support and physical affection she had been missing in her marriage to Charles. According to Hewitt's later accounts, Diana was the one who initiated their physical relationship, telling him, "I need you. You give me strength. I can't stand it when I'm not with you." For a woman who had received little emotional warmth from her husband, Hewitt's attention and devotion were intoxicating. By 1987, the problems in Charles and Diana's marriage had become visible to the public. The press began referring to them as the Glums because of their obvious discomfort in each other's presence during public appearances. Their body language showed a couple who could barely tolerate being in the same room together, let alone maintain the appearance of a loving marriage. The situation reached a dramatic confrontation in 1989 when Diana attended a birthday party for Camilla's sister, Annabelle Elliott. Diana approached Camilla directly and told her, "I know what's going on between you and Charles, and I just want you to know that." This bold move showed that Diana was no longer the shy, compliant young woman she had appeared to be during her engagement. She was beginning to fight back against the situation that was making her so unhappy. The early 1990s saw the marriage deteriorating further as both sides began to wage a public relations war through the media. In 1992, Andrew Morton published Diana, Her True Story, a book that revealed intimate details about Diana's unhappiness, her eating disorders, her suicide attempts, and Charles's affair with Camilla. While Diana initially denied cooperating with Morton, it was later revealed that she had secretly provided tape recordings for the book, making it clear that she was actively participating in exposing the truth about her marriage. The same year saw additional scandals when private phone conversations were leaked to the press. Squidgygate involved intimate conversations between Diana and James Gilby, a friend from her social circle, while Camillagate featured embarrassingly personal exchanges between Charles and Camilla. These leaks brought the royal family's private dramas into the public sphere in an unprecedented way. By December 1992, the situation had become unsustainable. Prime Minister John Major announced to Parliament that Charles and Diana were separating, though they would continue to share parental responsibilities for William and Harry. The fairy tale marriage that had captivated the world just 11 years earlier had officially collapsed. The separation period was marked by continued warfare between the two sides, with each trying to win public sympathy. Diana was generally more successful in this battle, as her youth, beauty, and apparent vulnerability made her a more sympathetic figure than Charles, who was seen as stuffy and unfeeling. her work with charitable causes, particularly those involving children, AIDS patients, and the homeless, contrasted favorably with Charles's more traditional and less emotionally engaging royal duties. In 1994, Charles attempted to tell his side of the story in a television interview with Jonathan Dimbleby. He admitted to adultery, but claimed that he had only resumed his relationship with Camilla after his marriage to Diana had irretrievably broken down. This admission was intended to rehabilitate his image, but instead drew more attention to his infidelity and his long-standing relationship with Camilla. Diana's response came in 1995, with her famous interview on BBC's Panorama program with Martin Bashir. In this extraordinarily candid conversation, Diana spoke openly about her marriage, her affairs, and her struggles with mental health. She confirmed her relationship with James Hewitt, saying, "Yes, I adored him. Yes, I was in love with him, but I was very let down," referring to his cooperation with a tell-all book about their affair. Most memorably, Diana addressed Charles's relationship with Camilla by saying, "Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." This line became one of the most famous quotes in royal history and perfectly captured the public's understanding of why the marriage had failed. In the same interview, Diana expressed doubt about whether Charles was suitable to be king, and she spoke about her own desire to be a queen of people's hearts, rather than a traditional monarch. The interview was watched by over 20 million people in Britain alone and had a devastating impact on the royal family's reputation. The interview proved to be the final straw for Queen Elizabeth II, who had been trying to keep the marriage together for the sake of the monarchy's stability. Within a month of the broadcast, she wrote to both Charles and Diana demanding that they proceed with the divorce as quickly as possible. The divorce proceedings began in earnest in 1996, with negotiations over Diana's financial settlement, her title, and arrangements for the children. Diana ultimately received a lump sum of approximately $17 million, plus $400,000 per year, for her personal expenses. She was allowed to keep her apartment at Kensington Palace, and would share custody of William and Harry with Charles. However, Diana was forced to give up her title, Her Royal Highness, and would henceforth be known as Diana, Princess of Wales. This loss of status was particularly painful for her, as it meant she would have to be courteous to members of the royal family, including her own children once they reached majority. Queen Elizabeth II reportedly wanted Diana to keep her royal title, but Charles insisted that she lose it. The divorce was finalized on August 28, 1996, bringing to an official end one of the most watched and analyzed marriages in modern history. Diana was now free to pursue her own path, but she was also more isolated than ever before. She had given up her position at the heart of the British establishment, but had not yet found a clear new role for herself in the world. The failure of Charles and Diana's marriage represented more than just a personal tragedy for the individuals involved. It marked a turning point for the British monarchy, forcing the institution to confront changing public expectations about authenticity, emotional openness, and the role of the royal family in modern society. Diana's popularity with the public, which remained high even after the divorce, showed that people wanted their royals to be more human and relatable than the traditional model allowed. For Diana personally, the divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter in which she would try to define herself independently of the royal family, while still using her fame and platform to support charitable causes. She was about to embark on a period of her life that would see her become more confident, more politically engaged, and more willing to challenge established conventions. It was also during this period that she would form some of her most meaningful friendships, including her relationship with Elton John, built on their shared experiences of fame, personal struggle, and the desire to use their platforms for good.